have your tinfoil hat all made and cinched down tight over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Mickey.
This is Dave with no Mickey. He's in transit. He's actually chosen the worst day to try to make it home from the beach to where he lives, and he'll be running late, or he is running late. Yeah, it's crazy now to want to do that. And today was 36 degrees or higher in the west. Hopefully we'll get weather from Mecky when he returns back and hopefully makes it for the show today. Anywho, wow, right, so we are coming to you from Australia for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio, where it's home to fresh, unfiltered ideas and conversations. You'll find in the chat room where I'm right now, Hey Amiga Logos, UFO Cowboy, I'm scrolling backwards first, Fleeced Surf, Futurist, Jim Jones. Yeah, it's awesome. Lots of chatting going on there. Where is Narara and Meki? Well, now I'm here. It's all good, Amiga. Oh, OL. Now where was I? Yes, and the chat room, which I've just been describing, is great, and the station's website, there's a link to it from there, and the station's website's also a great place to get your merch. So they've got a really cool ensemble, not really ensemble, variety of things that you can buy either as a gift to someone else or just for yourself. Do splurge. The prices seem high for what they are because, you know, manufacturing and shipping and all this, and it's all custom work. But, you know, you are supporting the station when you do that. I know that you can get some shiny side out mugs and hoodies and things like that as well. Go to our website for that, shinysideout.net, I think that's what it is. Anyway, this is show number 604. 604. And we are talking, I don't know why I didn't update on my thing. It should have updated. Hang on a minute. I've got a live stream, see? I'll paste the live stream into the chat room. I think I can. Nope. For some reason. Oh yeah, maybe that's it. Try that. There we go. Yeah, see 604. So you can catch us on air, believe it or not, like you're doing now, hopefully. Or you're probably listening on YouTube. You can do that as well. You can do that online or on air and anywhere on your smart device. So grab an app to listen that way. You can listen everywhere, not anywhere, but listen everywhere. Or, because anywhere might be in time, see. Everywhere is, you know, geographical, and anywhere would be like any when. That's how my brain works. And you can sit up with your feet up, listening on a Grace Tabletop digital radio. It picks up these digital stations, which is really cool. And therefore, who cares? Relax. Here, I think 35 degrees or 36 degrees. Nice day. I was working my car and stuff, so outside. First day I've been able to go outside, to be honest with everybody, because I had the old Rona, had the coronavirus, and not a pleasant experience, let me tell you. If you missed Solaris' show, because she comes on before us, if you're only just tuning in now, you missed a great show. Let's put it that way. Always a great show. In fact, you've never heard of Solaris, you can just jump into the archives. They're free. Jump in there and you can download the shows. Tonight she had on a co-host, Caroline Bell Tumblety. I don't know why I put that voice on. I just do hundreds of voices, so you're lucky you get my actual voice, which is this one. From Navigating the Truth Discussing Planetary Affairs. Oh, that's right. So it's Caroline Bell Tublety from Navigating the Truth, who's another host of another show. I know her talking about planetary affairs. Yes, I reckon it's gone mad. It really has. It's gone crazy. Crazy. And look, my friend, when he listens, he's had an array of medical issues and surgeries and stuff. He's a good guy, and he does comment and tells me that I'm doing the crusty, when I'm on my own, it sounds like the Stingy and Battery show from Krusty the Clown. That's what it does. And he revs me up. So he's within his right to do that too, and I like it. So you can probably hear that I'm Australian. I don't know if you can. You're probably just used to voices and accents now and don't care. But I'm broadcasting out of Darkinjung country, and we have signs on the side of the road as you enter these areas, and it says "Welcome to Darkinjung country." That's what it says. So I know. You don't see them everywhere. We were lucky enough for our council to have the wherewithal to post it, and so I already knew it because we've been researching this stuff for a long time, and all the different areas, and this Darkinjung is the home of the Aboriginal stories. They started here with Biami and his 3 sons, and that story was sent via message stick across the land to all the other I don't know, mobs. That's what we call them here, not tribes so much. Anyway, if Meki makes it home, he'll be in Daruk people country, or Daruk country, and Meki and I, both of us, together and individually, pay our respects to elders past, present and future. Look, I want to start with something crazy, because, why not? We're talking about crazy. And there's a few topics here, right? And when I discovered Meki wasn't going to make the opening, and whether or not he makes any of the show, I'm not sure, because, you know what? Yeah. Now, let me put it this way. The fires that have been going on for the last, so let's call it 5 years, where you see trees pretty much intact but houses burnt, cars melted, their wheels melted, all of those things. When it kind of doesn't seem to make sense, and there's a house that just wasn't burnt at all, those houses that burned usually suffered from ember attack. So the fire front hadn't made it there, to be honest. The embers of the storm, with the great wind, blew laterally across the ground, ended up finding their way either underneath, I'm now pretending to be a tired person. They fly in all sorts of ways through the air and find their way in, cause fires in bushes next to houses, for instance, and the house could go up because of that, or for many other reasons. But when everything isn't burnt, when there's still a house on a slab and the bushes are intact, next door to something that burnt down, it's usually not the fire front, it's just the ember storm. We see it all the time. But as far as claiming the ownership of where did the Lahaina fire start, I've been following this story for some time. I heard initially some people way up at the beginning, because the autopsy of a fire it takes a particular skill, usually someone who knows what they're looking at can find more than one, if there is more than one start point, if accelerant is used, if other methods are used. And this one seemed as though it was power lines that string between telegraph poles that hang nicely when there is no wind. When there's a certain amount of wind, they just kind of swing side to side, but when just the right amount of wind or above is blowing, they can swing into each other and arc, and then you get molten metal sparks come off that, and they can spark up a fire for within while they're still glowing, right? So that looks as though that was the start of the fire in Lahaina. That's all I'm going to say about Lahaina itself, but there was, and always has been, the last 5 years, people talking about directed energy weapons. Now, it's very interesting that people should bring this up, because it is being researched by DARPA. It has been researched by DARPA and other folk, and the size of the commercially available machines can now fit into a 2.5 ton satellite. You can have lithium-ion batteries, solar panels, and a commercial grade laser, which only has at I think 400 meters or thereabouts as an orbiting satellite. You can have a spread of beam no wider than a meter. It's pretty good. And at the meter wide, it's still equivalent of 90 suns, which is the same as using a magnifying glass to burn something in the summer sun. It'll immediately start smoking, and if you're lucky enough, the material is just right, it can just burst into flames. And so that is something that can be done. No arguments. And satellites can be 7,500 ton. 7.5, yeah, that's right, 7.5 ton. Not 7,500, but 7,500 ton. That's pretty good. Sorry, 7.5 ton. That's it. Sorry, what was I talking about? So yes, they can be reasonably heavy, and orbit around, and you could do that if you wanted to. If you were Dr. Evil, you could have lasers and burn things from a distance. So it isn't impossible, and I don't want anyone to think it is. That no one would do it. Yes, they would. Well, no one has the budget. Oh yeah, they do. Why would they do it? Wrong question. You ask someone with a box of matches not to light the matches, and they'll be sweating, because as soon as you've done that, now you've told them you can't do something they're completely capable of doing, and they're going to do it. So that's what I think. I think that if a country, not someone, but a country in geopolitics, if someone wanted to do it, they could. It's completely within the realm of technology. And there's a really cool, he's probably ex-NASA or something like that, scientist who just went through this, and I've watched an hour or more of his video. He did talk about the blue things that didn't burn, but the example he gave about why, because he was able to burn them with a laser that had the same frequency spectrum as the one you could put into a satellite. And there's no need to go with the blue laser, because a blue object would reflect blue and therefore not burn. But he said that, and I agree with him, that it's completely possible that you could just use a regular laser, like a visible light spectrum laser, and it could do the same damage, if not more damage. So it doesn't care whether something's blue or not, it'll still burn it. In some cases, some of the houses that didn't burn, in retrospect now, looking at Lahaina, were buildings that had metal roof to start with, and that fibrous cement on the outside as panels. Looks like wood paneling, but it isn't. It's hardy, what's it called? Hardy plank, I think it's called, hardy board. That's the reason why they didn't burn. Most of the things that burnt had wood in some capacity on the outside. Even shingles, that's just disastrous. You may as well just make it out of flint. Make your whole house out of flint. Or just the tips of the matches. Just do that. It's equivalent. You would never build a wooden box house in the middle of a forest, because it would be gone if there was a fire. You're probably better off building a steel and Hebel house like I have. Anywho, I don't want that tested, but today was I think extreme fire danger here. We had, I think it was 35, the peak where I live. That wasn't bad, but everything's dry. We had a continuous northwesterly wind, which brings all the warmest air. And if there was something, the wind speed was sufficient enough for that fire to absolutely rip through anything. So luckily, touch wood, there wasn't anything so far today. I did keep an eye out, and you've got to have your go bags ready. Always have a go bag ready with at least a couple of days' food. Just some water. Don't need lots of water. You shouldn't be exercising. You should be conserving your energy. And the food is just so that you can last a long time and keep your stomach active. All right, moving on. Electric cars. What a dream. What a dream it is that we could have an electric car that takes so long to refuel. I suppose if you wanted to have it like a race car, the race every 200 kilometers or less, you'd have to stop the thing and like the race and just pit, and then you come back tomorrow and then continue racing after the car's charged, and then you race for about an hour or an hour and a half, and then you've got to stop the race again for the next day and then come back the day after they've recharged again. It's not where we'd like it to be. I think an EV race would be great. They have to be super sprint races, and there's still, you don't want the batteries to be punctured, just like you don't want a fuel cell to be punctured. While there are fatalities in motorsport, there's at the moment ways of dealing with those fires and fire suppression, but not so much with there's like, I'm going to say, not so much with EV fires, but I'll get onto something I've discovered recently. So there is an exceptionally fast ground hugging car that wins all these, not hill climbs, but go to woe things. I think it's in England or something, that it actually has a fan to suck it down, and then the other motors make it just absolutely zip, and it's crazy fast. And if that's the way of things to come as far as motor racing is concerned, well then, that's a lot of fun. Missing the sound though, just hearing zzz, like you're getting attacked by mosquitoes, isn't going to be too enthralling for me. I'm still a big V8 sounding kind of person, which they use biofuels in Australian racing, and it's 109 octane on your level in the US, but it's E85. It's race fuel. It only has a stabilizer and 15% conventional fuel. The rest of it is recyclable carbon fuel. So we should all be doing that on all of our regular vehicles, and then the price would come down. And I'm going to get myself in trouble. Big fuel could convert themselves to farming and making E85. They do now. They actually make it. They've got companies, the big companies, the big petrol companies do make a E85. Very hard to find it in the marketplace because there's very little, support for it. There's not many cars that can run it. But the Australian Commodore, I think it was the VE SS, made a dual fuel version of that where you could just put any fuel at all into the fuel tank, whether it was like regular 98 unleaded fuel, or you could put E85 and it would just work it out. It's pretty good. In race cars, you would replace the batteries with the tyres. Well, there isn't a way of doing it at the moment, and I agree. UFO Cowboy, thank you in the chat room for everyone that's the chat room person. Yes, that's a really good idea. They would just slot in like cartridges. I get it. But I'll explain why that's not so good kind of currently, right? So electric cars around the world continue to catch fire. And right now, when I say this, I do mean thermal runaway. So the batteries obtain thermal runaway, and that's by heat. You only have to get them over a certain temperature in Celsius. It's I think 38 degrees or some crazy. It's not that big. And and they run on fire. They just burst into flames. So like our previous show on the Dutch oven, which was the car transport vehicle that had the VW and some expensive cars I don't know where it was on the water, and I think apparently that it was said in the news there was only 50 EVs on it, but it turned out to be 500 EVs which occupied more than one deck, and one of the cars went into thermal runaway, and that was absolutely terrible. It cost a lot of the cars on the ship. It cost their lives, right? The cars' lives, and the EVs, all of them burnt, and the fire suppression that was put in place to have fuel fire, fuel burning car fires, they didn't work for the EVs, and it was a tragedy for those cars. Now, every single day the hundreds of EVs around the world catch fire. They just burn, and there's a very little warning. When you start to smell smoke inside the cabin, you just leave the car, just abandon it, and bring whatever you can out. I would never have too many things in your EV that are personal items. Like, just depersonalize the entire thing. Just leave, and stay away from the toxic fumes, because until now there was no way to deal with fire from a fire suppression perspective. There wasn't any way to deal with an EV on fire. The car would simply burn themselves out. In some cases, this can be a day or more for them to burn all the way. And while they burn, they give off lethal chemicals, cancer-causing chemicals, and simply toxic fumes that you don't want. Thank you, Amiga Logos. Told me the YouTube stream is good. So, when an EV burns, it's really bad, and there's no stopping it. Well, there wasn't any way of stopping it until this week. So, the reason why you can't just fill the car up with water, regular water, is because the magical properties of water is its ability to be able to take away heat and still stay intact as water. It doesn't vaporize. So some turns to steam, not very much, but its ability is fantastic. So it's called a heat coefficient of 1. Everything's measured on water. And in metric, 1 kilo of it at sea level is 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter cube. That's how big 1 liter of water is. So it's everything, and that's 1 kilo. So everything's actually pretty good. You can submerge an EV that's on fire, by the way, into a tub of water, like a container, just from the top, just lower it in there, and it'll still burn. Because the batteries are still attempting to discharge and going into thermal runaway, and then the neighboring battery does the same thing, then the next one, and then the next one. And because EVs produce their own oxygen, there's really no way to do this. You can flood a normal fire by taking away heat, but because it's an exothermic reaction that's actually happening, it's creating its own heat, and it doesn't matter what temperature it starts at, it's still going to make its own heat. It's like a firecracker. You can light it and put it under water and it'll still burn, right? Because it contains its own oxygen as well. So that's what happens with an EV battery. But Norway have just done something really, really, really super cool. They've invented a way of putting out an EV fire in less than an hour. And so you don't need to dunk the entire car under water. But what you do is they've discovered that using very cold brine, so that's super heavily salted water, let's just put it that way, that's super cold, minus 12 degrees Celsius. You'll have to calculate that for yourself for Fahrenheit. I'm useless. So what this means is there's now a way of dealing with shipping these cars in bulk with a lower risk, which is immensely popular with the car manufacturers, because they were starting to really panic about, well, if we're supposed to ship these cars around, how are we going to do it if they catch fire? Look at the risk. I mean, the financial risk of having a car on one of those ships that goes thermal runaway. You could lose your car, or then it's still not sellable because of the smoke damage to it, or the toxic chemical damage. Then you've got more effort. So even though the cars that go on there with fuel don't have very much fuel, they don't have a full tank of fuel, just enough to get them on and off the ship. So how do you put out an EV car fire using this salty brine that's really super cold? Well, you smash the 2 rear windows, the side windows first, to get rid of any pressure in the car, and then you smash the back window, and you actually quickly flood fill the car with this brine. That's how you do it. So when you do that, the freezing cold salty water, super salty water, the salt water does 2 things. It neutralizes the heat because it's so cold by protecting the next battery along that hasn't yet run away thermally. But at the same time, the salty water actually creates a connection between the positive and negative on the batteries and discharges the batteries on their own, so they end up completely without any voltage, and without voltage they can't catch fire. So it's truly amazing. Mind you, your car's completely kaput, right? You're not getting in that car and driving it away after you just open the doors up, and get rid of the water, get some heating in there and dry it out, replace the faulty battery, and away you go. No. Everything will start corroding on that car like there's no tomorrow. So it isn't to save that car and to reuse it. It's to save all the other vehicles, to reuse those, so that you don't get a runaway in a huge car park. And this has to be learned. We have to have the ability to store this super cold brine, and we need the apparatus to be able to do it, and the training to use these tools, because An EV fire can be on the side of the road for a day or more, just burning. You can empty water into it, it does nothing to it. It's not cold enough and it's not salty enough. So here we go. Hemp versus lithium batteries. You can stay at home and smoke hemp, or you can drive around in a lithium battery car. I don't know. I think they leave that up to you. The thing that I think is still the stupidest thing is that the governments of the world have decided that the best course forward to save climate change, to save the climate from climate change, is to address the least polluting and least emissions thing in the pie chart, which is transportation. It isn't possible to draw enough power for EV trucks if they were all EVs. It's just ridiculous. Can't do it. In fact, what do I keep hearing? The company that makes EV trucks uses like 2 megawatts, but you would need 30 megawatts to have a truck charging station, which is just outrageous. Like, that's insane amount of power. It's more draw than a small city. So it isn't going to happen that way. Besides, in Australia, the stats for, well, what is the percentage of emissions made? Just all emissions. Climate changing emissions, by the way. What is the percentage of the personal use cars? Or let's just bundle it into all transport. So all transport includes the mining trucks and diggers and the lorry things, not the processing, that's different. All of those, plus you see buses, but they can be either gas. I'm really not seeing EV ones. I've seen EV trams, but for the most part, every small truck and large truck in Australia, B double and B triple and B quadruple trucks are all diesel. Farming equipment, diesel. So not about the farm itself, just the equipment. So each of these is deemed a piece of transport, transporting something. It has wheels and a motor, and it makes emissions. And in the chat room, I'd like for you to have a guess what the percentage in Australia of emissions producing transportation, which does include buses, taxi cabs or taxis, wherever you're from, motorcycles and cars, as well as all those aforementioned things. So just have a guess, type in an amount as a percentage, and I'll just see how well you've been listening on prior shows, because you're going to be disappointed. Thinking about, just while you're doing that, thinking about the other polluters. We have, I don't know, big energy. I'm just going to say put big in front of everything. Big energy, so energy production, big pharma, that is chemical, pharmaceuticals. We've got farms or produce. So we have farming, and we call big farming. A lot of people type in. They only needs a couple of numbers. Type them in. And keep typing. And then we have industry. So we have heavy industry and light industry. Now, you didn't type a percentage. Come on. You can do it. Type a percentage in as a guess as to how much the entire lot of transportation, including diesel trains, I forgot those, private as well as commuter trains. So there was a study done, 84.3% of statistics are made up. Everybody knows that. No, this was a study done to examine the cross-section of emissions in Australia. And since no one's guessed it, I'm going to tell you what it is. All of the transportation in all the genres I've already mentioned total 6%. 6% of all of the greenhouse emissions that are produced in Australia, with all the other ones that I've already mentioned, as far as farming, power production, heavy industry and light industry. Each one of those are separate on the pie chart, and the little tiny sliver, honestly, little tiny sliver is 6%, but of that, I think it's 0.01% of all of that are private vehicles. Private, that's cars. You know, might have a truck. You might have a truck, or a motorcycle. And that's what they are. Private vehicle users, 0.01% of the 6% of all of Australia's emissions. So those people who get an EV, drive around, charge it, are totally happy with themselves. And I believe that you're allowed to be. I'm not saying that I like it, but go ahead. But you've got the choice. You can buy whatever you want. But given that it appears as though the only place that effort is being pushed towards to solve the climate tragedy that is occurring right in front of us, according to them, is not even the whole of the 6%. It's the, I don't know, a micron width line inside the 6%, which is 0.01% of all of the transportation. It's insane. You can't, so I shouldn't say you can't. The big yellow tip truck thing that you find at a coal mine, for instance, that has a bucket there that can fit my house in it. Those are enormous, and for it to run, I think it needs 2 9-ton battery packs. It has a diesel engine to charge the batteries, and that's the only way that can still operate. You don't just plug, there's no power source that's able to plug these in, and you don't want it to run out of energy halfway up out of an open pit mine. That's just not a thing that's going to happen. And there's barely enough power at the moment. There's the largest crane in the world is electric, totally electric, but it's electric because it has diesel engines that create the electricity to drive it. And I've seen one version of an even bigger one that has these massive power cables that go to it, but it can't go outside the length of the power cables. It can only ever operate that way, and it's crazy power. But you're still going to make the power somewhere. And in Australia, we don't have nuclear. We have very small amount of renewable energy, either solar, wind. I don't think we have tidal, but we have hydro. But we're coal. We're predominantly coal. So the EV people are maybe getting a quarter of their fill up during the night. If they've chosen to pay more for their power, they can opt to get renewable energy as that mix into their mix. And that's it. So it's preposterous, to be honest, if you ask me, about how we're solving this problem, because you can't fix farming and cattle production, for that matter. Cattle, create methane, which is worse than carbon dioxide. But if you burn the methane, then you equal the carbon dioxide output, It doesn't get worse. It's kind of better than methane was. So we should be doing that. They're telling us in Australia that gas, natural gas, the town gas that you get, not propane, but the town gas, that's now come to the end of its life. It's now too expensive, apparently, to solve. But if they slipped 15% of what they export to the grid, to our gas grid, then we'd be better off, because burning that gas is better than burning a coal. I know it sounds so stupid, and it's against everything you've learned or been told, I should say, that this should be the fix, but it is, sadly. And they're not touching, big industry, and they're not touching power production. We in Australia, we had the largest per household solar adoption because of some subsidies, and that's been actually quite good. Sadly, I can't do it because I'm surrounded by monstrously high gum trees, and it's such an extreme fire risk here, but because of that, we're shaded most of the day, and I can't possibly put solar on my roof for that. Sadly, just can't. But, what are you going to do? There should be a choice. We're not going to change the way we operate as nations. I'm just going to put that straight out there. When people say polluting cars, well, I'll say that the best hybrid car, which is that little Toyota Corolla, I think it's about 1,000 kilometers per tank of fuel. Ignoring the carbon that produced the vehicle, just straight up, and the disposal of the batteries and all of the negative things, the negative aspects, ignoring those. If I was to run my fuel guzzler with E85, it doesn't cost much to convert it across. If I did that, then I would be consuming less, creating less CO2 than the EV, the hybrid, not just the hybrid. And if that doesn't sound crazy to you, then good for you, because that means you know. But I'm just going to tell you that that's the way it is. A good hybrid car uses or produces only around about half of the emissions that a regular vehicle does, like a diesel truck or something. So, and I think a Dodge Ram was the comparison that I saw. So you have it, I think it's a pure EV. So you have a pure EV, and its comparison to a Dodge Ram after 10 years is that the pure EV has produced only half of it. And I'm going to say, and that's excluding all the inconveniences of having very few places to recharge your vehicle. And in some cases, in the outback in Australia, it's just a diesel motor. It's just a diesel motor charging a generator that fires up the power when you swipe your credit card. So you got to think that. And if you're not thinking that, then you've missed out. And yes, here's a great Gearjammer has put the hydrogen example there. Hydrogen is pretty good, and it produces very small amount of pollutants. Mostly water is the output, but because it's still a combustion engine, in my example, then there's still a very faint oil or lubricant burn things that you need to worry about, but let's just ignore it. So to run pure hydrogen, you can do it, You can do it. And you can run E85, which is only 15% of regular fuel. 85% of it is non-net new carbon or recyclable carbon. And you don't have to use corn. You can use switchgrass or something equally lame. It doesn't have to be a food crop that you're stealing for your fuel production. It doesn't have to be, wheat, corn, or what's the other one? Is it rye? I forget. Whatever the other one is. It's cornflakes, rice. Oh, rice. That's right. Rice and wheat. That's right. So if you've ever made your own alcohol at home, ethanol, which is alcohol, then you can hold your head high. That's all you really need is just, brewed alcohol. Do that and make a difference. You'll have to tune your car properly. You can't just run it without damage. So your car has to be made for it. I think the rubber seals need to be changed. And because you use a little bit more of it, you need to have a larger fuel pump and fuel lines and injectors. I'm considering that you're fuel injected to start with. It makes it really easy. But anyway, once you've done that, away you go, right? And I'm a big advocate of reducing the emissions, but no one's talking about non-net new carbon. They're just bundling it all together to make a point in which the end user is the only thing that's going to solve everything. But even if we all did it, and all transportation, in every example that I gave you earlier, that's still only 6%. Only 6% that you're going to reduce emissions. It's not even enough to worry about. Honest. I don't know. I'm not alone in this, but very few people are able to talk about it. And my belief is we're still in the thaw. The thaw didn't cease. We didn't get to a nice comfortable place where, we still had glaciers and winters were beautiful and we still had a stable climate. Well, I think the stable climate thing's out the door. We'd be honest. We're seeing larger storms, more destruction, higher average wind speeds, which means the whole system is accelerating. So, you can't say it isn't happening. You'd be lying to yourself if you said that climate change wasn't real. It is changing, and it's still thawing from the last freeze. And sea levels will most likely still rise 2 to 3 meters anyway along this path, and everyone can hold me to that. I'll take that. If we're still all around, I don't know, 15, 16 years? Yeah, it must be 16 years. If we're still all here then, great, woohoo, we've survived at least one thing. There's probably more to come. I keep seeing this in the last 6 minutes. I keep seeing this video where Bill Gates is being interviewed. I think I've seen the full clip, but like the full show where he's just a guest that comes in and talks about the virus. And that the next one it'll be way worse. And I watch his face and his micro expressions, and he seems delighted in the fact that he can tell us what's delighting him, I don't know, but that he can tell us there's going to be another one that's going to be worse, and then he smiles. So was he smiling that he was successfully finishing a sentence? I think he's better than that. Like he's like a first year old, like a first former, I don't know, first class person. No, not like a kid reading their homework out aloud in an oral exam. So, who's just pleased that they got through it. No, I don't think that's the case with Bill. Maybe he's delighted in the fact that he was able to inform people that the next one's going to be terrible. And that was actually while the last one was still going on. And it's kind of new to me. So not news. It's not news to me because I had COVID this week and it was pretty rough. Just gonna say that. And I was lucky, very lucky, to have Paxlovid. I would have taken ivermectin at the same time, but and I do consider the Paxlovid to be, it's kind of a combo, but combo medication, which is kind of like Pfizermectin if you join the two together. It's Pfizer's own tool set for antivirals. Right? It's rather effective, and I remember having that, what was it called? Years ago, the Australian government had stockpiled a whole bunch. I can't remember the name of it now. Of some medication, right, which was meant to be the last bastion. Well, they needed to give that out in a very similar coronavirus-styled virus epidemic that we had. Tamiflu, that's the one. So I was given that to be able to deal with it, and they had to give it out, like tons of it out. And it had an expiry date anyway, so it wasn't going to last forever, and just lucky this thing came around and was able to cure us all. But that was awful. That was just like COVID, to be honest. And now all these studies are showing that the natural immunity is better anyway than the vaccine is. But these are, being said by people who are producing live screenshots during their presentation of articles or peer-reviewed papers. And I'm not going against medical advice. You do what you need to do and follow the instructions. Let's put it that way, because I'm no doctor. I'm never going to provide medical advice. I'm only telling you my experience. Yeah, Tamiflu, that's the one. Yeah, UFO cowboy. So that got me through it, and got me through it the first time and this time as well. Not the Tamiflu, but the Paxlovid. And without that, I managed to get it early. I think I was able to, at the first sign of symptoms that I tested positive, I called my doctor up and they did me a script over the phone. And I've been isolating in a room in my house, so much so that my back went out, because to sleep in there is just terrible, and the lounge is awful. And now that I throw my back, and the Tamiflu gives you diarrhea, that's not a good thing. And I had my nose all cauterized along like a couple months back, and I shouldn't get any bleeding noses, but there I got a bleeding nose as well. And just what a week, eh? What a week. And today I woke up and I felt like I was being tasered. I had a bulging disc or something, and I had to stand up and just try not to sit down at all today. And I did. It was pretty good. But monstrously hot outside to do work. The sun was really strong. But it's Bathurst coming up soon, this week, and I'm going to be away next Sunday for that, so I won't be on air. But Mackie will, and I've not seen an update from him. I'm sure he's on his way. But anyway, it's the end of the first hour. The second hour is going to be our show cycle. And for those on YouTube, you get a little hint there. Hypothesis and the Epiphany Part 4. And I imagine the music's going to start any second. So, thanks. There's music. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned in, because I'll be back. And I'm just going to see if Mackie's going to make it for the second hour. It'll be fun. Anyway, take the time to donate. And I'll catch you in a minute or two.